Now, there we go. So we can officially start. So welcome everybody to the 2024 tax time tips. And just to kick off, the disclaimer for tonight. So before I go into a bit of background about myself, just making sure that what we go through tonight really is for educational purposes. I'm not a tax agent. I am a CPA, and I'm giving you general sort of foundational knowledge to help you as you're working through your own personal situations. But really, you would need to seek legal or tax advice when for your particular circumstances. We can talk about things generally, but the purpose of this is really to give you that general education and information. So big welcome, and nice, this slide is probably representing a lot of what all of you are studying as well across all the different faculties, which is really fabulous. And those students listening in who can't be here live, a big welcome to you as well. As we like to start off here, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from which we're all connecting from today in this online webinar. I pay my respects to the elders past and present and recognise and celebrate their connection and role in caring for country over thousands of years. May their wisdom and strength be with us today. So I've got a couple of screens, probably like everyone, clicking things here and there across them. So just bringing this over so I can see everybody. Just a quick little bit of background about me. Some of you I've met before and worked with in some one-on-one sessions, which is fabulous. Some of you I've not met before. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Liz Mclardy. I used to teach at Southern Cross University in undergraduate and postgraduate accounting units, primarily in management accounting. That was my area of expertise. But I've moved on to a different university and another educational institute in Melbourne. But I still work and consult with the scpa in helping support the postgraduate students. Really, the financial literacy piece is where my interests are. I've done in addition to being a CPA, I've done a diploma in financial counselling. So that's another sort of set of skills that I bring to these webinars, is the financial counselling and wellbeing space as well. Understanding that our financial lives do play a big role in our wellbeing and can cause a lot of stress. So the real mission and aim through these webinars is really to alleviate some of that stress from you, so you can focus on your studies and the fields in which you're doing such great study. So tonight, you're all here to talk about tax. Would love to see in the chat as well, maybe a quick couple of words, maybe what you first think of when you hear the word taxes, just to get a general sort of feeling from everyone, what the vibe is between yourself, your relationship with taxes and tax time. Is it something that makes your stomach churn, or is it something that makes you feel sort of anticipating you have to do a big task? What's the feeling? What does tax time? Amanda, I love it. That's a lot of emojis. I think that's great. A bit of swearing in there too, probably, which is probably a common thing. Catherine's also the same. A little bit of maybe frustration there with that exclamation mark. Siraj saying you don't like it. But Natasha's sharing some of the benefits from the government. So is that in terms of receiving benefits potentially, and maybe adjustments to tax rates and things like that around this time of the year we will be seeing changes in that as well, particularly for this year. We won't go into that in detail, but we might have a bit of a chat about that at the end if we've got time. And then Dana, thanks for sharing too. So you're dreading opening up the box of receipts, but great to hear that you've got one. So that's exciting. And you've got yes, of course, and you buy lots of different things being a primary school teacher, I'm sure. So, but wonderful that you've got a bit of a system, and we'll talk a little bit about systems too, and things that maybe you might want to think about changing as we're coming to the end of this financial year. Maybe things that you might implement for the next financial year to make it easier for yourself as well. So let's get into it. So what I want to cover off tonight is tax deductions in general, and I know that we're all coming in at different fields of study, but it's going to at least give you an idea to how to approach your thinking around the deductions that you can put through in your tax returns. I want to confirm some of the key dates and deadlines so everyone's comfortable with knowing when they've got to do things and by what dates. and just to have a refresher in terms of what the tax rates are for this year. And we can then, have a bit of a chat and have some Q&A at the end as well. So hopefully that's going to be helpful to everybody. I saw Amanda's cat there for a minute. I was thinking it would be nice to share. he or she can absorb some of this knowledge as well. So everyone's welcome. All animals, definitely. So what I wanted to start with was obviously a big question. Tax is massive. It's a huge topic, but I wanted to really try and identify the things that are going to really, be the most helpful to you. But in saying that, we've got individuals here joining in with different levels of background in terms of tax. So I am going to be starting sort of at the bottom. For some, this may be things you already know and too simple, but for others, it's really going to give you that first level basis, and at least maybe some important information for which maybe you could then have a conversation with your tax agent or go and dig deeper, with your own situation in mind. So firstly, just wanted to get a feel too, just on that topic, would everyone be able to indicate in the chat too how they prepare their own? Do they do their own tax return, or do you go to a tax agent, or do you use like an online service like eTax? How's everyone been managing their taxes previously, just to get an idea of who's the boss? Catherine, so you use ATO, great. Yep, that's great. So that's using My Tax via MyGov. So Jordan, yeah, you usually do your own as well. Good. The tax agent from Amanda. Siraj, you haven't done one yet. Okay. Used to do an agent and they get expensive. Yeah. So, and sometimes what it can be, it depends on your own circumstances. So obviously you're all coming from different situations and different stages of life as well. So you could have quite a simple scenario of perhaps it's that you have, you're working and you're studying, and your study is directly related to your current work, and you can claim that. We'll talk about that just now as a deduction. And that's pretty much it. But we can also have students who maybe have rental properties, you may have share portfolios, things that then make doing your taxes a little bit more difficult and complicated. So that's when you may then use the services of a tax agent. Sometimes, yes, they are getting expensive like everything, but it can be possibly something to consider when, you might even get a tax agent to do it for you 1 year, and then you might look at what they actually did and see that, oh, okay, you can understand what they've claimed in the process when you get your tax return, and then you might feel more confident than doing it yourself. But most of the time doing it yourself, that the ATO is trying to make it as simple as possible too, with keeping track of, your records. So we'll get into that as well. So with Deanna, that all of your receipts in a box. We'll talk about My Deductions as a way of tracking those for next year as well, to make it a bit easier, because then they populate and go straight into your MyGov account. Okay, so if we've got generally, then it sounds like most are doing it yourselves, and I'm assuming, are you claiming self-education expenses? So just again, question there just to get an idea from everybody. Are you claiming it? And are you confident that you're able to claim your current study fees and any other expenses? Okay, Catherine, so great, cool. So the key with, okay, great. Oh, good. Okay, good. So this is the main thing that's going to be really useful. So what I'm going to do is just explain and talk through. So if what this will mean is most of you are currently working, and you're studying. So the key thing to consider is that, so obviously you're working, you're having tax withheld, and what you can do is then claim the cost of your studies and related expenses. So we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. And what you can do is if your study relates to your current career. So it can't be that you are, say you are a nurse and you're studying accounting, you can't claim your your fees for studying accounting to then reduce the tax that you're paying as a nurse, because it's not in the same career. But say that you are working as a nurse and that you're then doing a postgraduate in a specialised area that will then help you to maintain that position or to achieve a promotion in that same field of career. You can then claim the cost of your university fees or any other related costs as well. So that's essentially what we're talking about. So great, Diana, thank you for your questions. You're saying, how about, so you're a primary teacher and you're extending your qualifications to teach a kindergarten level. So that is in the same field. So that from my, but again, you may want to seek confirmation. But generally I would be saying, yes, that's in the same field, and that's allowing you to progress in that same field of work. So you can then claim the cost of your studies, and we'll talk a bit more about what else you can claim. So just to make sure, so this is just reading through, and I know I've got lots of wordy slides tonight, so apologies for that, but a lot of this, because it's so legal, it's good just to be very clear on what some of the words are. So studying to improve your current career, so that's the key thing. So if that's what you're doing, then you'll be able to claim the self-education expenses. So to legally claim them, you need to be improving your academic qualifications for the job that you already have during your studies, or you're improving your knowledge or skills for your current job. You're a trainee, or your self-education course is part of a traineeship. And you can show that your course or qualification or degree can lead to an increase in income within your current employment. So that would probably be the only piece, Diana, when you're talking about the primary teaching to kinder. Is your current employer, is there a kinder that's part of that same, I guess, is that sort of, does the school have the kinder linked to it somehow? That might be part of that sort of consideration. Siraj, I'm just taking note of your chat comments here too. So you're working as an assistant nurse in aged care, so to become a registered nurse. So yes, that's in the same field. Soren, I work as a sports officer in primary school, looking to work as early childhood. Can I claim a tax deduction? So again, so your primary school working, and is the early childhood is not going to be within the same employment. So it's only those two for Diana and Soren that are a little bit grey areas. I would almost be wanting to ask the tax agent to have their official, seal on it. But from my initial perspective, it's still within the same field. It's mainly just that it's not within your current employment. That's the only thing. So it is just it's a different institution that you'd be working in. Okay, so Diana, you're saying there are different systems and different employers. So yeah, that's a bit of a grey area for that one. Sorry, I can't be definitely sure, but yeah, I'd be looking for a little bit of confirmation. And what I'm going to show you at the end is some links and resources that you can get in touch with that are free. The ATO certainly is one of those, but we've got some in the area as well that may be just a good source for you to check off with. Do you need to meet one or all of those? So you must meet one of those eligibility criteria. You don't have to meet all of them, but it must be one of those. Yeah, cool. So hopefully that gives you an idea. So, but the key thing is it's about that current career. So that's the main distinction. So it's not that you're having a career change, and you're hoping that you can then offset your current income with the cost of that career change expenses for self-education. So it can't be that. Patricia, I just see that you've got your mic off. Is it okay if you pop it? I mean, you've got it on. Could you turn it off just while we're talking through the material so we don't have the echo? If that's all right, I'll just ask you to. Yeah, beautiful. I've done that. Okay, so if it is that you've got that, so I think for a lot of you, we have confirmed that there is that connection. And Amanda, I think yours is as well, right? So from hearing that, that what you're studying is connected with what you're currently working in, and then that will also help you to set you, or you feel like it's a bit grey area.
I think it would be a bit of a grey area for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sort of more doing what I'm doing to move higher up again, and not within the same same employer.
Same employer and same industry field, not really.
Same industry, no.
No, yes, that might be a bit trickier, yeah. But again, it might be worth a conversation to check in with, yeah, just to double check.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm just having a look at the comments too. So Jordan, would this be the same if I'm working as an administration for a psychology clinic and I'm studying in psychology? Not likely, because you're doing the administrative tasks. So if you were already at a sort of maybe a lower level psychology role, and that you were then doing your masters to allow you to be a full clinic. However, I'm sorry, no, excuse my lack of knowledge around it too, but you would need to be working as in that psychology area and already have those skills. So because you're really working in administration, yes, it's in the setting of psychology, but it's still, yeah, the connection isn't really there for that one. Yeah. So it's more so I'm hoping that makes sense. So we've got those examples there of teaching, which is good. So the primary school going into to childcare or to kinder, so that's quite a connection. We've got some from Siraj as well. So you're already working in nursing, but you're in aged care, but you're wanting to advance and become that registered nurse. That correlation and connection is there. So hopefully that's clear for everyone. So if there is that connection and what you are currently studying relates to the roles where you're earning your income, you can claim. And when we talk about claiming and deductions, so just to remember that it doesn't mean that you get every dollar back, but what it means is that it's reducing the tax that you pay. So it's bringing that tax down, but it won't be by every single dollar, because it depends on because you've got the staggered rates here in Australia. But what you would do is you'd put through the cost of that deduction, and you can include things like the course fees. Of course, it doesn't include your HECS amounts, but things that you've actually paid for. So your course fees, textbooks, student services fees, stationery. If you have a laptop that you've purchased and you use for study, you can claim the depreciation. So if you've bought a brand new laptop, usually they depreciate over 3 years. So you divide that total cost by 3. So if it cost $1,000, $300 odd, you can claim as a deduction each year. Transport and travel from your home or your workplace of education. So if you've got those, if it's a bus or if you've got your own car, you would be keeping track of the kilometres travelled. And then there's a cents per kilometre for petrol that you can claim, which is detailed on the ATO website as well. So you can only claim the portion of those costs that relate to your self-education. So making sure it's that, with your laptop, that it's the majority of the time that you're using that laptop for those self-education. So if it's that you're using it for work and study, you need to keep a diary. I think it's usually a month of a year to then demonstrate how much, so what percentage. So if you actually looked at it and in terms of hours, you may only use your laptop for study 30% of the time and the rest was for work, but then you'd be claiming a deduction, if that makes sense. Diane, I'm just checking your comments there. So if you put your course fees on HECS, you can't claim it, but if you paid up front yourself, you can. Correct, absolutely correct. Yes, that's right. It's the same for you, Catherine, is that right? So if you're using help, you actually can't claim your HECS repayments back, because they're already, the government, I guess from the government's point of view, is that they've already given you this advantage of having the loan, and they won't allow you to then claim a deduction for those repayments. So it's either if you pay it up front, you can claim it, but it can't be. So it's only you can claim it if you pay it up front, not the HECS repayments. Does that make sense? Yeah, great. Okay. So yeah, to be mindful of what portion of those expenses are relating to self-education. Proof of the purchase is always required. So Dana's got her box of receipts, which is fabulous. This doesn't just relate, we're going to talk about some work-related expenses as well. But making sure that, so for that example of the laptop, that you've got the original receipt of the laptop that you purchased. A great habit to get into is to use the My Deductions app, which is provided by the ATO. So that's something maybe you do for next year. But once you buy something that either you're going to use for work or for study, that you take a photo of that receipt, and then you can either just, it depends on what your process is, but you can then just add that to My Deductions, the app. And then at the end of the financial year, you can then export those into My Tax online, so they're all there and you've got all the evidence as well. It also means that they don't fade, so often over a year your receipts can fade, so yeah, it's a really handy way to do that. Siraj, if you buy a laptop or an iPad now in June, which is the end of the financial year, can you claim on it in tax? You can, yes. So again, it would be looking at if it's a depreciating asset, you would divide it by its useful life. So you can check the ATO website around that. Usually for technology items, it's 3 years. So you would take the cost of it and divide it by 3. Also, again, remembering we've got to think about the proportion of time that you're utilising that asset for study or work. Yes, so just keep that in when you're doing these calculations. So yeah, keeping those electronic receipts is really important. Even if you don't use the My Deductions app, just getting into the habit of taking a photo. I actually just have a folder set up in my emails that just says tax, 2024, and then throughout the year, if I take photos of my receipts, I just put them into that folder because I find that's easier than the app, but that's just me. So, but at least you've got it somewhere, as opposed to it's a paper copy that's getting losing its color, and then you don't know how much it was that you can claim. Just a note for international students, so those who are on a student visa can't normally claim self-education expenses, so that's probably one that I would be looking to get some assistance from a tax agent, depending on what your visa is and your requirements. So have a look into that as well, but just to note. So hopefully that's making sense for everyone in terms of the self-education. Any questions on that actually before I go into sort of some of the work-related deductions that you might be able to claim? It's great that everyone's just asking questions as you go anyway, so that's fabulous. So I'll just keep on going. So what we want to also consider, so obviously when you're earning income, the first thing is to think, because you're all studying, can I reduce the tax I have to pay, relating to some of those study expenses. But you may also have work-related expenses that you can claim as well. So a good thing to have a look at on the ATO website, put the link here, is there are some specific industry guides, so they can be really helpful depending on where you're working. So particularly for nursing or teaching, they give you a good guide into what are some of the things that you can claim. And for many of you, if this is the first time that you're educating yourself about this, it may be that you can't claim anything for the financial year that's just about to end, but it gets you in a really good position for the next financial year. So if you arm yourself with all of this information, you're going to hit the ground running. Come the 1st of July, you can really make sure that for the next financial year that you've got it in your mind. You maybe set up a bit of a process for yourself to capture, some of this information to get the most out of next tax year. But what you might also be able to do is look back and think of some of the costs that you might have incurred. So what we're going to be looking at, so we've got, in order to claim a deduction for your work-related expenses, so we've got the 3 golden rules. So first is that you've got to have spent the money yourself and that you weren't reimbursed. So sometimes it can be that you've got to purchase something for work, but work actually reimburses you for that. So it might be, depending what it may be, technology items, it may be industry specific, maybe clothing items, whatever it is, but it has to be that you have actually spent that money, then you have been reimbursed for it. So really important to check that. That the expense obviously has to directly relate to you earning income. So that you had to have this item. So for some industries, I'm thinking, which none of us are working in here, but if you're in a construction industry and you've got steel cap boots, that's claimable. For nursing, if there's a particular clothing item or safety gear that you've got to have, again, that's directly related to you earning your income. If you're working from home, I'll actually just talk about that in the next step. But the third golden rule is that you've got to have a record to prove it as well, which is the big key message with all of this. You can't be claiming anything unless you've got the record for it, because it's best to kind of assume when you put your tax return through that if you were audited, that you've got all of the data to support all of the deductions that you've put through. And if any of them were queried, that it wouldn't be a stress. So you really want to sort of take that load off you. You don't want to kind of try and sneak something in, because in the back of your mind, there's going to be just that little bit of stress hanging around, which is unnecessary. So just make sure when you prepare it this year that you know, and really useful to kind of have an Excel spreadsheet or something alongside your tax return that you're submitting through the ATO. And it may have, links in it, or maybe you set up a folder. It's got all your receipts and details. And any of your, say, maybe even thinking or justification to why you've included it. So if you were to be audited, you can have that conversation. Another key thing, so if you've got, I usually say just for everything, have a record, but you'll see that claiming anything that's $300 or more, you must have written evidence of a receipt. The record item in this three golden rules are more around, you might have a bank record, so you may have the transaction coming out of your bank account, so at least you can see that, yes, I paid for that from JB Hi-Fi, I bought that iPad or whatever. It may not detail the product though, so if you've got something that's over $300, you must have the written evidence, so that's your receipt. But I think if in doubt, it's better just to have the receipt and you've got all the information you need. So a lot of you are probably aware too, during the COVID times, did anybody claim the working from home rate whilst, over the last couple of years when you've done your tax returns? Is anybody aware of those? Great, okay. And did you use the shortcut method? So it's a matter of, it's a really quick and easy deduction. So if any of you are still working from home, it's working out, making sure that you know how many hours that you are working from home. So it was easy in the COVID times because we were all from home. So if you were a full-time FTE or equivalent, you would have 77.5 hours and you would be able to claim that shortcut. It used to be lower than 67 cents. It's actually come up. This was the same rate as last year. Amanda's saying, no, you're in aged care. My goodness, that would have been really stressful as well. But that's great. So in this past financial year, did you work from home at all?
No, I'm just about to start working from home. So it'll probably really kick in for me in the new financial year when I start. I'm going to start working from home actually in July. So
okay, great. Yeah, perfect. So that's really good to keep in mind then for the next financial year, that it's a matter of, and you don't have to keep track every single week of the hours, although you'll probably know because you're contracted to do so many hours. But for some people, it may be that they are casual and it may vary. So I'll take those two scenarios. So the first is if you are a full-time employee, you'll know your hours, so it's not really complicated. At the end of next financial year, you would then work out over 52 weeks. I usually take off the amounts that you would have for holidays, sick leave, and then you've generally got a total number of hours for the year, and then multiply that by 67 cents. And that's the amount of deduction that you can claim for work-related costs.
Yeah.
So if you're a casual worker and your hours vary, it's important that you keep a track of, and because I have to do this myself, I have to double check it. We're double checking on the ATO website the recording requirements for this, if it's a month or 6 weeks, but they need you to have evidence like a diary itemizing all the individual contracts that maybe you had that set out the number of hours that you did each week. So you don't have to do that for a full year of 52 weeks, but they allow you to do it for a set amount of time, and then you use that as your standard, and then allows you to calculate over a full year what were the hours. So obviously, if you are casual, choosing a month when you're working a lot is probably a good strategic move, because that will maximize that return for you. So that's the two options. Important to note, when you when you're doing your work-related deductions, you've got two options. So you can claim them individually. So we were kind of talking about that at the initial part of this slide, where we're thinking about, you know, things like laptop or iPad, whatever it might be. So you can claim the actual cost of things, or you can use the shortcut method. So, and in your actual cost method, so if you're a work from home permanently person and you've got an office and you've got that square meterage set out, you can also claim electricity and water. So sometimes making that effort to do that is worth it if you are full-time working from home. But if you're not and it's easier, this shortcut method is pretty straightforward, but it's probably a good scenario to look at which one gets me the bigger deduction, and what kind of costs, would you be claiming. So it's either the shortcut method or the actual cost method.
Confirmation.
Yes, Liang, yes. Were you asking a question? Oh, I can hear your mic's on. Welcome. Oh, no worries, sorry. Must have been a mistake. And then just detailing a little bit more in terms of what are some of the work-related deductions, other things that you might consider. So depending on what your work is and what's involved, you could potentially have car expenses if you're using that vehicle for work-related purposes, and obviously things associated with maintaining the car, so fuel and insurance, maintenance. So needing to keep a logbook for that is important. If you've got travel expenses that relate to your work as well, so you might have accommodations and meals. A lot of the time you may be given allowances for that too, sometimes in work. So look out for that as well. But if you've incurred additional expenses outside of that, that you can claim those as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the uniform and work-related sort of clothing items too, if you're required to wear particular protective clothing. So Amanda, I don't know if that was the case for you when you're working in aged care in this past year or during COVID, if there was particular things that you had to purchase, maybe they were supplied by work, but was there anything that you had to buy?
Was supplied, and we just purchased our own shoes. So
yes, okay, yeah, sure. And well, those shoes might be a tax deduction because you wouldn't use them for anything else. So I imagine that they would be quite specific in terms of being for that role. And particularly during that time, they were probably segregated to you wouldn't want to wear them anywhere else. They were your work shoes. So yes, that would be worth looking at as well. But again, those industry checklists are really good. They may prompt you to think of things in your particular fields. So I'd certainly recommend having a look at those once you're finished with this webinar. Anything else anybody wants to share in terms of the work-related expenses or experiences that they've had? Anything that you think might be useful for anybody else? Please feel free to share as well in the chat. That would be great. But great to hear that most of you did use the shortcut method. I forgot what it's called, because that's really great, and it does give you a reasonable deduction as well, which is really nice. So that's a good one to remember.
If they have laundry allowance, then you can't claim laundry, I take it, because they're paying you an allowance for laundry?
Correct. Yeah, so that's right. So you've given that allowance for it to cover the costs of that. Yeah, that laundry. You're right. Yeah, so that's when it's nice, but yeah, you try to get as much back as you can, but yeah, only where you can. Some other deductions that you might not have thought about, again, depending on your situations, investment deductions. So if you are in that scenario where you may have investment properties, even managed funds or shares, the costs associated with those can also be deductions. But again, that does get into a bit more of a complicated area. It would be probably good to get a tax agent's input into the preparation for anything to do with investment properties, or just, and again, it can even be, well, simply if you do have even, although we haven't had it during the COVID times because we had such low interest rates, which is great for our mortgages, but not great for returns if you had, money sitting in a high interest rate saver. But if you're getting that, but you may have an account fee. So if you've got those account fees, you can use those as a deduction as well. So pop those fees, those bank fees and things like that, they can be deductions. Any donations that you make as well to any registered organisations, sometimes we forget about those, but it can be useful to go back and have a look at, any transactions that you do a transaction listing for your accounts online. Just run one for the full financial year. I know it'll probably be very big, but you can just then sort it and just have a look, just double check if you can remember if you've made any donations, but they've got to be made to a registered organisation. Those home office expenses, but again, that connects in with what we talked about here with working from home expenses. So again, it's either you use a shortcut method, or if you are working from home for significant amount of time, you've got a home office, then you'd be looking and detailing all of those expenses, and looking at the equipment that you've got, the depreciation on that, the square meterage that space occupies as a percentage of your total home space, then allows you to kind of proportion what part of the electricity costs, etc., you can claim. So it gets a little bit more complicated, but still worth investing the time in to see if you can get a bit more deduction. Income protection insurance can also be claimed. Often many of us have it through our superannuation, so that can't be claimed because it's within the superannuation account. But if you have it outside of your superannuation, you pay it separately, that can also be a deduction. So another one to remember there as well. Okay, and just I guess a bit of a reminder too at this time of the year, just thinking about all of the end of financial year sales, and we get tempted and we think, oh yes, I'll go and get all new technology for myself or all new office equipment. Don't buy it just to get a deduction, because you're spending $1 to save maybe 30 cents. So it doesn't really make sense. Buy what you need, make the most of what you've got. But if you've already spent and you do need things, yes, of course, but still be frugal about how you're going to do it, because you're still ending up, you're still having to pay the money. So don't let all of those sales and those great salespeople convince you that you should be buying everything now. Only buy what you need, because it's absolutely going to cost you. In terms of the key dates and everything for submitting everything and making sure that you're doing everything that you need to on time, so you don't incur any fines. So obviously the 30th of June coming up is the last day of the financial year. 1st of July is when you can start preparing and lodging returns, but it's 2 weeks after that your employers are still probably working on finalising all of the tax that they've withheld from you throughout the year. So they've got 2 weeks to finalise all of that, report that back to the ATO. So you wouldn't be really doing anything to submit. You wouldn't submit your return in between those 2 weeks. You're very efficient if you were, but great time to sort of prepare your documents, seek assistance if you need it. Checking those receipts that you've got, so if you've got that shoebox full of receipts, I'd be saying, maybe invest a bit of time in just taking photos of them all and getting them into a filing system somewhere and backed up. So you've got that, so you can get rid of the physical files and then you can have them, all the electronic ones. So then after your employers have lodged all of their documentation, you've got until the 31st of October to lodge your tax return, if you're doing it yourself. If you're getting a registered tax agent to do it for you, the deadline is usually later. So usually March next year, they can give you a bit of an extension. But if you haven't worked with a tax agent before, or you're changing who you're going to be working with, you've got to make contact with them before the 31st of October. So don't leave it right to the end. I'd be, thinking and planning and working that out, because it becomes very busy and hard to find somebody to help you. But if you've got somebody that has helped you before, make sure that you work with them and get your information to them as soon as possible. But if you are getting to the point later in the year and you're going to miss that deadline, you need to contact the ATO as soon as possible, just to make sure that you are not ignoring it. But the best thing is to be honest, and then you can they may arrange an extension for you. And if you don't lodge your return, you can incur a fine starting from about $300. So really easy. You don't want to pay that. Just make sure you get it in on time. And probably what you've all experienced too in the past, once you've submitted it, you get, they're usually processed within 2 weeks. So if you've submitted it and if either you've got to pay or they're giving you a refund, that will be in your account within 2 weeks. They're usually pretty efficient. So that's pretty good. And just a reminder in terms of what I know that lately we've had in the media, there's been changes to tax rates. They're not for this current financial year, just to be clear. So you are likely to see a change in your income from the 1st of July. And it just depends on where your pay cycle is in that, but you'll start to see what impact those changes are going to have on you come the new financial year. But what I have up on the slide is these are the current rates. These are the rates for the financial year that you'll be processing your tax for. They don't change. So yeah, it'll be next year's, and then you'll start to see an adjustment in your earnings as well. So it sounds like we're all going to maybe earn a little bit more, because those tax rates have come down for some of those different thresholds. But I always say to wait and then see, don't count your chickens before they hatch. So let's have a look and see what it looks like when it comes through. But these are the rates that we're working towards. And just a couple of, ideas or suggestions, next steps, which is things that I've already really suggested, is making sure that you identify. So if you've got 2 jobs, make sure that you identify all the sources of income. Maybe you have sort of a side hustle job as well. And you've got to make sure that you include the income for that. So yeah, all of your wages, income from your bank interest as well, making sure a lot of the time the ATO, MyGov accounts, if you've still got the same bank accounts as last year, they can automatically populate some of that data, which is great. But if they don't, make sure that you include it as well, because all of the banks do notify the ATO of all of the bank interest. So yes, you need to include that. I know every little bit of we're trying to earn, we feel like it's taken away from us, but at the same time, we can then claim any of the fees bank fees that we're paying as well. Important to include any government allowances that you might be receiving as well, dividend income. So yes, this is kind of the suggested next steps while you've got a week and a bit until the end of the financial year. Identifying and thinking about some of those deductions that you can claim. If you've got questions, thinking about who you're going to approach, who you're going to find out, just to make sure that you've got all of that lined up. Get all your receipts together. Download the My Deductions app if you want to use that for the next financial year. Does anybody use My Deductions? I'd be interested to hear. And thanks, Dana, for your question about scholarships counted as income. I feel like you need to look at, so there's different scholarships. So some are, it'll probably be quite clear in, sure, when you've received it, whether it was a letter that had conditions, or because some do and some don't. So it's likely that you won't be taxed on the scholarship. But it'd be worth finding out and going back to that, like the original documentation they've sent you. Yeah, because usually what it's doing is it's just reducing the amount that you have to pay. So it's not income; it's just reducing that cost. So it's unlikely that it will be taxed. Yeah. So didn't have any. So thinking that not many people are using the My Deductions app, but yeah, worth a check to have a look at. You haven't found? Is it not coming up? Are you just googling it, Amanda?
I'm in the App Store. I'm just putting My Deductions, and it's something Australian Taxation Office comes up, but I don't know how official that.
I'm just googling it now. It takes you to the ATO website. Access to My Deductions. Download the ATO app to your. So I'd go in via the ATO website, and then it will take you. So then it says download the ATO app. So it's actually called the ATO.
Okay.
It must be the ATO app. Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than My Deductions. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. So check that one. So it might be a good habit to get into for the next financial year.
Yeah.
It's worth also just considering you can make, which some of you may be aware of. So obviously your employer is paying super into your super fund, but you can also make additional contributions up to your concessional contributions cap. So that it's capped at $27,500. So if, say, your employer contributed $10,000 in the year, you could put $17,500 into your super fund, which would reduce your taxable income, if that makes sense. So you have that opportunity to reduce your taxable income, increase your super, but then the consideration needs to be made that once the money's in super, it's in your super for a long time until you retire. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. It's usually something to consider later when you're approaching retirement as a way to really boost your retirement savings, but just another consideration you might like to look into. And then, yes, last was contact a tax agent. So that's another option. Just a little bit of a little tax checklist here that I had. This is a little bit more of an example too. So this was just from H&R Block. They have this obviously loads that will provide you with all sorts of checklists, but this can be sometimes helpful if you're wanting to just make sure you don't miss anything, to kind of get a general checklist and identify all of the bits that are relevant to you, and then you work through those, make sure that you've got all of your receipts and documentation to support them, and cover those off. This was just a little bit of information too, just if you're wanting any additional help, or understanding what's possible in terms of your tax, to have a look at the ATO website is a great place to go. It's not always the easiest to follow, but it does have a lot of information in terms that they've really improved it a lot. So definitely looking at those industry guides in terms of what deductions that you can claim. And yes, setting up your access. I'm assuming everyone's using MyGov now as well, which is a really easy way to lodge and keep track of everything. So that's a really great place to go. In addition to that, I've just done a little bit of research about some sort of free taxation advice that's also available. So there is a centre in the Northern Rivers. So I know that often with postgrad students who may not all be located at the campus in SCU, so you may not be in Lismore or Gold Coast, but for those who are, just that there are some free tax services available in that Northern Rivers area. There's also the Griffith Tax Clinic that is available, so via email or phone you can contact them. That's through Griffith University, so that's in the Northern Gold Coast. They also have a clinic where they've got students who are studying tax, but they have tax agents who obviously, so similar that you might have in health, where you have maybe a physio student, and then you've got the qualified physio who's there to help and assist. It's a similar thing with the tax clinic. So you have students who are studying tax, but they are supported, and you'll end up having your advice confirmed and guaranteed by a tax agent. So that can be another way of getting that support in a cost-effective way. And then there's also the ATO tax help program as well, and their phone number as well if you've got questions, to contact them. Obviously it's a busy time of the year, But if you've got questions that you're then going to feel really, you have that assurity that if you've got something you're not sure of, that you can speak to them and then still feel confident when you're processing your tax return that the decisions that you've made, which is really important. Is there any other resources that anybody else uses that you'd like to share that you think that might be helpful for other students who are here tonight or those listening back? Nothing else? No, all good. Well, that's kind of bringing us to the end of the session. So I'm hoping that that's been helpful. And I know it's a cold Wednesday night, so it's hard to stay awake. But I'm hoping that that's been helpful. But if anyone has any additional questions, I'm happy to stay and answer those. And also, if you've got anything else that you want to have a chat about, just before you head off, I guess the final reminder, I do like to have this slide too, is although taxes, it's working out, it could bring up a lot of frustration and angst. It can also just be a good opportunity to just also appreciate and enjoy where your tax money goes. We may not, I know it's a political topic and you may not agree with where it all goes, but now and again, really good to just appreciate some of those brilliant things that we do have in Australia: clean beaches, beautiful parks, amazing schools, support services, public hospitals, great services. So yeah, just really nice to sometimes, balance out that energy of, frustration and stress to also appreciate, what a great country we do live in, and where that money most of the time goes to somewhere good. And just to final message too, just so for anyone who doesn't know, you can connect with me one-on-one if you'd like to in the future. There are free sessions available to all of you through the scpa. So it's a matter of emailing them at theskills@scpa.net.au email address if you'd like to book in a time to chat about. It may be to do with budgeting. It may be a particular financial goal that you're trying to achieve. We can talk through how to plan for that and things to consider. It may be a particular part of financial literacy or something that you're not understanding. So yeah, happy to speak with you and support you in that way as well. And a final note just for the SCPA is, if you aren't a member, you can become one for free and you get notification of all of these kind of workshops. You get early notification, which is great, and access to all of the resources. So you can sign up. Many of you may be members already, but you can just sign up through the scpa.net.au website there as well. So that's all for tonight, I think. And thank you for all your feedback as well. That's really appreciated. I do really appreciate that. And yeah, pleased that you found it useful. Good luck and enjoy doing your taxes. And I hope that it's a little bit less stressful now that we've had a chat about it too.
Thanks, Liz.
Lovely. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Dana, for your feedback too. That was great. And Jordan as well, Siraj, really appreciate it, and Natasha as well. So pleased that was helpful, and I wish you all a lovely evening.
You'll be able to email those slides to us?
So Alison emails the recording and the slides to everybody who registered. Yeah, so you've got those links. Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely, no worries. Thanks.